Karim, it was a real pleasure hosting you today at Mindspeak. It was a really inspirational talk. What were your impressions of the club, and did you enjoy the experience?
Yeah, very much. I really did enjoy it, and I'm actually very happily surprised that at the level and depth of the questions I was getting, it's really refreshing.
Good.
Unique.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm really glad. Karim, we've known each other now for 2 years. You've had all this volatility in Egypt, the toppling of Mubarak, the macro conditions where you are listed, these big investments. You're the biggest private equity investor in Africa. Just characterize, how you've managed to navigate what are incredibly choppy. There are not many private equity companies I can think of which would have had the number of curveballs and vectors that you were dealing with.
True. No, I agree. It's been, and even for us, it's been going back a little bit longer because obviously, no doubt, the financial crisis, the global meltdown, if you wish to call it as such, in 2008 definitely did have an effect on us in the sense of it completely changed our funding structure. It changed our investment partners substantially. And so we've been now coming up to 4 years of roller coaster situations, both locally and regionally and globally. I think it is still, when it comes to events in Egypt, I think it's still very much probing, and there are new faces in government, there are new dynamics in the country. And it's definitely extremely difficult to navigate. And we're doing that by basically, again, going back to what I was saying in the session, is we are aligning ourselves with Egypt, not with any specific player in Egypt. And that's a very relevant thing to note. So we are, in that sense, making investments that do the triple win I was just mentioning. So obviously they make sense financially for the investor group, makes sense for the labor force, and makes sense for the host community. So that's, as long as you stick to that, you should be able to be fine. Sure, there will be some flack, some collateral damage issues on media, and media in Egypt is pretty sensationalist. Okay, I mean, like many developed countries, it will take its time before it settles down. But look, I think we're rather happy with the way we've managed that. Quicksands happening in Egypt. I think this project, the Egyptian refinery project,
which was an achievement, right? I mean, $3.7 billion at a time when
and given the multitude of, before the revolution there was one player in Egypt. Yeah, post-revolution there are many players. The fact that you can get all of these players who have conflicting interests sometimes to back a project that they view, that they want to be having backed, seen as backed, is, I think, a great testimony to our ability to navigate the new waters of Egypt. We did that at a time when there has been, a negative drain on the currency. Egypt has lost around $21 billion of reserve from January 2010 to date. There is still very little foreign actual investments happening. So for us to pull this one, $3.6 billion at this time, I think we're very proud of it and very happy, and underlines our status as pro-Egypt in that sense.
And do you think that we're still in a period of intense volatility in Egypt, or you think there is there's a bit of stabilization coming in?
No, I think I still do not, although seemingly on the political side things seem to be stabilizing, but I think that's not reflective of the true balance of power still in the country. So you have the Islamists, you still have a very strong military who has a lot of interest. Despite what happened, I do not discount them. They do have a role in the country and do have interests. And the third being the liberal, non-Islamist, civilian political spheres. So there is a lot still happening. Okay. There is also, on the economic side, I think things in Egypt are going to get very bad. There is a general consensus by everyone in power, or near it, anyone political, and a lot of consensus also in the street that the current subsidy
Yes.
scheme as it has been run the last 40 years cannot continue. And once you start changing that structure, invariably you'll have an era of extremely high inflation. That extremely high inflation will have to be cushioned by cash subsidies that have, X number of years to phase out, and will definitely have implications on socioeconomic cohesiveness, and on simply said on criminality. No doubt about it. I mean, a lot of people will become much more poorer and will have less access to until a period of readjustment of consumption patterns happen. And I think, to put it simply, I would not like to be in a governing seat in Egypt today. And I don't think it has really to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. Anyone sitting in this situation will have to take a conscious decision that will be extremely unpopular.
Yes, which is very tough.
Yeah.
Now, Karim, you've made investments. Obviously, everyone knows the RVR investment in Kenya in particular. But if I can just turn around and look at the other ones, agriculture. You've gone in a very big way in Sudan. You were talking about how expensive maize is per ton in Juba. Most of the people who've invested in agriculture on a big scale seem to me to be supplying external markets, which seems to me to be a political risk in an event of a famine or something like that. I was interested in your model because you're essentially talking about servicing a domestic market.
Correct.
Do you want to just describe that a little bit?
Yes, I cannot see how any private investor in his right mind, and that leads to something else, but can do an investment in agriculture on the continent and then export it. Because, you see, when you're saying most of the agricultural deals you're aware of, I'll bet you most of them are G2G.
Yes, they all are, as far as I can see.
Governments.
Yeah.
So obviously governments have a completely different agenda. So if it's, any government in the Gulf has a food security agenda, they think this is the way to do it, but this is not economically. This is like Saudi Arabia planting wheat. That's not something we're interested in. That's not something a private sector player would be interested in. Any private sector activity on the continent in farming, I can guarantee you, with the exception of South Africa, is probably, I'm talking obviously commodities and cereals. I'm not talking about fruits or horticulture. I'm talking about food production on this continent, with the exception of South Africa, cannot be geared towards export because there is no infrastructure to export it with. Okay. At the same time, that same lack of infrastructure to serve the export of grains is offering protection from imports if you are actually producing locally. So that is the whole premises of our investments in Sudan for the local market. We don't make money producing at $450 a ton of maize to sell it in Egypt at 250. I mean, what can, not factoring in transporting it. This is just production on site. So harvested maize costs us anywhere between $400 to $450 in Sudan, in South Sudan. So why would I take it even to Kenya and sell it for $300?
So how much land have you been concessioned in the Sudan?
These are lease agreements, around 250,000 acres in the north, 300 kilometers south of Khartoum. And there is another 250,000 acres in the south, just 100 kilometers south of the border in South Sudan Unity State.
And in the north, are you looking to supply the northern food market as well?
Correct.
Yeah. And then, obviously transportation, you're the biggest barge company in Egypt, you've got the railway concession here. There have been challenges, obviously, because it had been run down. We all know, when we're from Kenya, how much it had been run down. Lots of sort of swirling noise about how it's being operated. Is it on plan? I mean, I saw your numbers you put up there. It seemed you were making some good incremental gains, but is it going to...
The incremental gains you saw are not a function of the investment spend yet.
Yes.
Those incremental gains were done by getting on board professional management and by getting best practices, processes, and procedures from our technical partners, ALL. The investment, in my view, obviously, for the less informed, obviously, there's a big feeling that things are late. Things are late. Most of it is outside of our control. So you have to note that there is no investment to talk about before having closed the financing. We signed the loan agreements here in Nairobi in KICC on the 2nd of August 2011. The first dollar we drew down was 29th of December. Okay. In between were a lot of conditions precedent that has to be fulfilled. Some of them by the borrower, RVR, some of them by the host governments, which, to be completely honest with you, I think was done in a record time. These 4 months, 5 months, were very active. There was a lot of goodwill by everyone to make sure this happens this time. Yeah. So when I come to RVR and basically challenge their performance, I come and do that starting 29th of December. So 29th of December, you had access to $164 million. You drew down $40 million. What have you done with the system? Look, I think we could have done a little bit better on the delivery times, but again, you have to realize, at the end of the day, this is an industry whose suppliers are really global elephants, GE. For GE, Africa is about, from a railway perspective, is really about South Africa and Egypt. Okay, that one has 3,500 locos. That one has 3,000 locos.
How many do we have? How many do you have in our?
We have 75. Okay, so from a span of attention, it's good news for them that we're knocking on the door with money and trying to get spare parts. But they won't stop an order going to South Africa for our sake. So the point I want to make is that we are getting a lot of learning in terms of how to more efficiently manage our procurement system. And then you have the normal delays. So the rails should have arrived early June, arrived late July. That's 2 months delay. Some of it on the supplier side, some of it at the port side, some of it on the way. I mean, it's not fatal delays. Let me put it like that. So we're hoping that hopefully by by Jan-Feb, the first impact, and just so that we're clear on this, the impact will be felt by cargo transporter, cargo owners, in terms of time, delivery, and reliability should start kicking in, as I said, January, February 2013. That will make it 12 months since we dispersed, for which the effect to start being seen.